My name is Kara and I'm a home cook. Come along with me today while I restock the pantry with a few of my favorite easy staples, like yogurt, peanut butter, beans, and granola. While we're in the kitchen, let's make dinner. A crispy marinated celery root with a salsa verde and those delicious home-cooked beans. I soak these beans overnight in cool, clean water and a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. I find that soaking beans plus the apple cider vinegar makes the beans much more digestible. It also has the added benefit of making the beans cook a lot quicker. You can sometimes save an hour or even 2 hours off the cooking time if you soak them ahead of time. So I am straining the beans, rinsing them off, and then putting them into the Dutch oven and covering them with water. I'm also going to add some aromatics to give these beans some flavor. I am using a whole onion and a whole garlic head and just slicing off any of the root. I do try to cut this really finely so that the root stock stays attached to the garlic and the onion. That way I don't have to fish out a whole bunch of different pieces at the end of cooking. I am also using a bay leaf and some purple dulse, which is a red seaweed. I've had this from Burlap and Barrel for a couple of years, so I'm trying to get through it. I also often add a dried pepper, and if I have any fresh herbs, I'll throw that in as well. Okay, I am going to bring these beans up to a boil, let them boil for 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'm going to turn the heat down almost all the way to low and just let them cook slow and low for a couple of hours. After the initial boil, that's when I typically add salt and olive oil. I find that if I add oil earlier in the process, there'll usually be this kind of dirty bean foam that I often skim off the top of the beans. And I find that, if you pour in the oil of course rises to the top, and then I'm just kind of skimming off the oil itself. So I wait until I have skimmed the beans, add the oil, add the salt, and then I continue to kind of add salt throughout the process depending on what the beans need. First thing I'm doing today is straining yogurt that I made in the Instant Pot the day before. The yogurt finished fermenting at the end of the day, and then I just put it in the refrigerator overnight. I find that if you let the yogurt sit from 12 to 24 hours in the refrigerator before you strain it, it will strain out thicker. This is how you make Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt is just strained yogurt, and you can make it as thick as you want depending on how long you let it strain for. I started using a new yogurt starter. This one is by White Mustache, which is an heirloom yogurt brand here in the New York City area. And this yogurt starter will probably last a couple of months of being cycled out and reused. So I have two different yogurt strainers. One is a nut milk strainer. It doesn't fit all the yogurt that I typically make, so I also strain some of the yogurt with cheesecloth and a fine mesh strainer. This goes by much, much quicker. Sometimes in about 4 hours it will get to the thickness that I'm looking for. So I'm going to fold it over a couple of times because this cheesecloth is not super finely woven, and pour the yogurt in. And then you'll notice that I'm not using any plastic. That's kind of one of my goals with making yogurt at home, is to avoid plastic as much as possible. So I just use a random Pyrex lid for the nut milk strainer, and then I just use the cheesecloth as a lid by just folding over the cheesecloth. And then I'm just going to put this in the fridge to strain for the rest of the day. Okay, let's make some peanut butter. These are raw blanched peanuts. I buy these in bulk. I think I got 10-pound bags from nutstop.com, and I usually store them in the refrigerator or the freezer just to make them last a little bit longer. I'm going to roast these in a 350 degree oven for anywhere between 30 minutes and 45 minutes. and once they've cooled, we will process them in the food processor. A quick dishwasher unload and load. I took a break to eat lunch and run an errand, and I sort of burnt some of the peanuts. They're not totally far gone. It's mostly just everything that's around the edges. I'm gonna pull those to the side and I'll just snack on those, and then the center ones, once they cool, I'll turn into peanut butter. Okay, let's quickly feed the sourdough starter. We're going to use some of the starter in granola later. I'm also going to make bread in a couple of days, and this starter's been in the fridge for a couple of weeks and it needs a couple cycles of revivement. I'm just going to feed it with a 1:1:1 ratio so that it's ready to go in 4 hours. And I'm just using bread flour and warm water. Okay, let's make dinner. I am following a recipe from Anna Jones that was in The Guardian. I love Anna Jones recipes. I have several of her vegetarian cookbooks. This celery root came from the CSA. It's been sort of intimidating me, so let's just handle it. I'm gonna wash and then peel it and slice it into wedges. Now I'm making a marinade for the celery root. This has lemon juice, maple syrup. The recipe calls for a fresh red chili. I don't have one, so I'm just using some dried silk chili. It also calls for fresh thyme. Don't have it, so I'm going to use some dried thyme flowers and crumble those in the marinade. We're going to blanch that celery root and then submerge it into the marinade and let it sit for a couple of hours in the fridge. I'm also making a salsa verde to go on top. The recipe calls for cornichons, herbs, capers, olive oil, lemon juice, and zest. I ended up doubling and maybe even tripling the cornichons for some reason. It was a little too much. It was a little too acidic at the end. So definitely follow the recipe as written, even though it was still pretty good. All right, after the celery root had marinated in the fridge for a couple of hours, I went ahead and fried them up in a cast iron pan and then served them with the salsa verde and some of those delicious cooked beans. The yogurt in the cheesecloth has finished straining, so let's go ahead and put that away. I'm always surprised about how easy it is to peel yogurt out of cheesecloth. It seems like such a messy task, but it sort of just wicks off really, really simply. I'm putting the yogurt in one container and then I'm saving the yogurt whey. I usually use yogurt whey either as a water replacement in a baked good like a focaccia, or I use it raw directly into a smoothie, which is a great source for probiotics. But if you have anything that you like to use yogurt whey in, I would love to hear it because I often have a little bit more than I need. The roasted peanuts have cooled, so let's make peanut butter. I sort of burnt some of the peanuts that were on the edges of the pan, so I am pulling those off and putting them in a jar, and we'll just snack on those. I am pouring the peanuts directly into the food processor with about a half a teaspoon of sea salt, and we're going to process these until the peanut butter is nice and smooth. It's always sort of mesmerizing to watch peanut butter turn from grainy to doughy to grainy again, and then finally to smooth. Just be patient and they will eventually turn into a really, really smooth, beautiful peanut butter. I'm just putting the peanut butter away in a weck jar. This can be stored at room temperature for a month or even longer. You could also throw it in the fridge and it would last for a couple of months. All right, the final task of the day. Let's make some sourdough discard granola. That discard is ready to go. I'm following a recipe from Andrew Janjinjian, and I'm going to mix that sourdough discard, olive oil, and a liquid sweetener together. I decided to do a mix of maple syrup and boiled cider, and I added vanilla extract. Since I was using the maple syrup and the boiled cider, I wanted to kind of lean into this fall moment, and so instead of cinnamon, I used pumpkin spice. I then added old-fashioned oats, some peanuts, and whatever seeds that I had on hand. So I used a mix of sunflower, flax, hemp, And then I remembered that I had some puffed quinoa in the pantry as well, so I added that in. I threw in some shredded coconut, and then I let that sit at room temperature for about an hour. I ended up baking it later that night and not filming it. I realized halfway through that I forgot to add in the salt, so I put in salt. I also tasted it at that moment and decided it needed more sugar, and so I drizzled maple syrup over it. I ended up sort of overdoing it with the maple syrup, so the end result was a little more sweet and more candy-like, but that's all right. We'll just pretend like it was a healthy treat. And there is everything we made today. Thanks for coming along with me as I restock the pantry with easy meal prep staples. If you're enjoying my channel, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time on Home Food TV.